All right, we will jump on in. Great way to kick off the weekend with John and Larry. Yeah, I'd love to just kick it off as we're talking about unlocking supplier relationships for food safety excellence. I'll just pass around. Larry, if you want to kick it off, introducing yourself, and then passing off to John.
Yep. Thanks for the opportunity. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Larry Rehmann. I'm a 20-plus year veteran of the food industry with notable companies like Diamond Foods and Eckert Frozen Foods. And prior to that, I was in manufacturing, believe it or not, and educated as an accountant. So, but love my time in food. Still, even though I'm retired, I still stay active in it. And look forward to the discussion today.
I'm John Raede, about 35 years in the industry. I started in poultry, worked for Foster Farms in the turkey division, 711 F Street in Turlock, California. And I worked on I was a boning line supervisor. And then I moved on to Gallo Salami, and I worked on the packaging side. And so I did like the puff packs, and so I managed that department, both in San Francisco and in San Leandro. And then from there, I went to Chef America, and so I went from production kind of more into the quality side, started working with suppliers, helping them. Before third-party auditing really started, and so I did some auditing for them, and then we kind of rolled into helping suppliers get better and kind of growing suppliers, which is really something I was very interested in. Dale Rice was a big part of that. He had the vision of that, and I was more the boots on the ground execute guy. And then Nestle bought Chef America Hot Pockets, and then rolled into Nestle, and it's been about 18 years there at Nestle, and was very fortunate to be able to do the same type of work. So but from more of a domestic supply side, I was exposed to a lot of international suppliers. So Central America, South America, China, and Europe. And so had a wonderful career, met a lot of great people, and I was very fortunate.
Thanks. Well, we're so glad to have you, John. My name is Patty McNamara, and I'm the founder at Alera. And I got into food safety through a severe food allergy and just realized how it affects all of our life. And so I started Alera. We work with companies to go digital with food safety quality data, automate supplier management, and then unlock data in plants. But our main goal is to make food safe for everyone. So we love having conversations like these with veterans so that people earlier in their career can just learn from your guys' experience. And I will say, we did a conversation earlier in the year on supplier management and nobody showed up. And now we got Larry and John. We've got like some VPs of quality said they're coming, some CEOs. So you guys are the Hall of Fame cast. So really grateful to have you. Maybe before we jump in, would love to hear like the background on your guys' relationships as far as it goes from a supplier standpoint.
Well, when I was the CEO at Eckert Frozen Foods, we were a main supplier, big supplier. Part of our business, a large part of our business was supplying Nestle Foods. And John was one of the auditors that came to our plant. And as I told you while we were waiting for it, I have a lot of respect for John. John is the epitome of a collaborator. He made us feel at ease, and we developed a strong relationship between the two companies. I feel in part because of John. So looking forward to today's discussion with him.
And Larry, you followed that script perfectly that I sent you. So I just want to thank you for that. That was spot on. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. So Larry, when he was with Eckert, so they provided the pepper cups for us, and so that was a big deal. And so it was a big seller for Nestle at the time, Stouffer's, and then Lean Cuisine as well. And so that's how our relationship started. And I knew immediately because Larry was very fortunate, a good group of people working there. But if you don't have the proper management in place, you can turn something that's very positive into something negative quickly. And so Larry was able to take them to another level, and we were able to go in there. He was very open to have me come in there and help them and talk to them. And he provided a lot of support, and his folks did too. So that, and as we're rolling into into the structure of the discussion, it's, you know, it's that creating relationship. You know, business is personal, and you know, and relationships are personal as well. And so to have a good relationship in business, there is that personal side of it. And not that it would drive you to make a bad decision. I think being, you know, having a relationship with a supplier, a good relationship, you're able to tell them things and be open and honest with them. And Larry and I have always had that from day one. We had that relationship where we were able to speak openly and honestly about what, you know, what the concerns were, or what, how we can get better. And so that was a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, even before you jumped on, John, Larry was talking good behind your back. So I think you two are the perfect two to talk about this conversation for unlocking supplier relationships. You guys are the gold standard. And as we're talking about supplier relationships for food safety excellence, maybe we can just talk about why do supplier relationships even matter as far as food safety goes?
I think, sorry, John, I'm just jumping in.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You know, we touched upon this yesterday a little bit. The food safety culture that we had a discussion on earlier this year, Patty, starts at the top, starts with the mission statement. And I think that has to trickle down throughout the entire organization. And, you know, as I evolved, or as I went through my 20 plus years of food safety, you know, I watched that evolve into the supplier management portion of the business. And supplier management now is basically a comprehensive plan that has a strong food safety component to that, because it is that important. It is about protecting your brand, and the relationships you have with your suppliers have to be open, have to be communicative, have to be collaborative. In the food industry, we're kind of all in this together. We're all striving for the same thing. We're all wanting to sell our, you know, products. We're wanting to, you know, sell our business, and we're fighting to protect that brand. And if you don't do that on the food safety side with suppliers, it'll bite you. It'll simply just bite you.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's a very interesting thing, and I've always been I'm very fortunate in my career where people help me a lot. And so, and then my whole thing was to pass that on. And I was raised that way, you know. So, and when I would start going into some different suppliers, you know, and coming from a Chef America at the time, people didn't know Chef America, they knew Hot Pockets. So when we started that, so I'd walk into a supplier, and I'd sit down and they'd say, hi, you know, and so, all right, so you're from Chef America. I'd say, yes. And they'd say, it'd be a new supplier, let's say, that we were looking at. And they'd say, oh, is that like a food service? You service restaurants? What do you do? And I said, no, we make a product called Hot Pocket. And they'd look at me and they'd say, oh, my kids eat those. And I would say, my kids eat those too. That's why I'm here. And so let's talk about, you know, what it's going to take for you when you supply us for whatever that item was. I think it was like 700 something different items, you know, different types of ingredients. You know, that is why that's why we need to have a relationship with you. We need to be able to trust you. You know, Ronald Reagan had a great saying. It was trust but verify. And so when we talked a little bit yesterday was about a company that's actually performing well and disciplined in what their controls are and what they've identified as risks. They're very disciplined in that. It's not easy. It's a difficult process to go out there on a daily basis when you're running and do the things you say you're going to do, and perform the tasks that have to be done. It's so easy. Well, I got to go pick up the kids, or I need this or whatever. Oh, I'll get that tomorrow. Well, maybe that would have been the difference, to go out and verify that those procedures and processes were being done at the time that they needed to be done. And so the companies that I noticed that were very open and say, oh, here we go. Look at us. We're audit ready every day. This is how we operate. And come in. You can come in any day, unannounced, whatever you want to do. You come in and you look at us and we're fine. And then on the other side of the scale, we're very closed and very protective. I lost you guys.
We're here.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Here. All right. We'll get these things off then. All right. So technology, keep moving, keep going. So anyway, and that was the thing. Those companies were the ones that were audit ready every day. Then the other ones, if they had the basics in place and they looked like they were trying to get better and they were sincere about it and in their actions they were getting better, then those are the ones that we would work with to help move them along because they wanted to.
Yeah. And so for you, it sounds like you would start on the personal side of things where it's like, hey, our kids are both eating Hot Pockets, and then be like, there needs to be a base too of wanting to grow. Is that right? Are those the things you're looking for when you're thinking about strong supplier relationships?
I think, people connect on different levels, and technical people, a lot of times are just, the nuts and bolts, right? Just, are you doing the program or not? And let's get into the details of the program. That's very important. You need that. But there's also the balance. Life is balance, right? And so you have to have that side of what, like we talked about last time, the why, correct? Well, why are you here? Why did John Raede show up at our facility? Well, this is why I'm here. And this is what's important to us. And that rolls into that communication piece, the level of what are the expectations? Okay, it's not just price. Price is just the starting point. But now let's talk about, do you have the programs in place? Okay, if you don't, then are you willing to put those programs in place? And are you willing? So we would put people on hold, so to speak. Say, okay, we love the product, we love what you're doing, but we need a higher level of assurance that because things happen. They happen. And kind of my throwaway line was always, look, I know things are going to happen in your facility. Just don't send them to us. Right? So how do you control?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. So control in the beginning, right? Make sure you have a hard door that you're checking that product all the way through. And when you have your positive release, you're making sure that the product you're sending to us is not going to cause an issue. That's the thing. Then you work back from that into the preventive side. And you have so many procedures and processes in place, redundant systems to make sure, and you're under control. Then you're audit ready every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talking about the relationships of suppliers, and it's one of the reasons I enjoy having John on this conversation is we went through operational challenges with Nestle on the cups, as John, and what he's referring to is the Stoford stuffed bell peppers that you see in the freezer section of your grocery store. We went through operational issues. We spent time in their plant, learning about what their issues and concerns were with the peppers they were receiving. We grew. We had a good foundational food safety program, and it ended up being better. I mean, because of the relationship and because we opened up and we were very collaborative all the way around, we even went to one of their plants to review their safety, just their plant safety type of operations and programs. And Eckert became a better company because of that. You're always trying to be, sustainable for the future. You're not just living for today. You got to live for tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. I don't know how you get around problems, issues, and concerns anymore without being collaborative with companies that are supporting you or with companies that you're supplying products with. The worm has turned in the food industry. It's no longer auditing, food safety, quiet corner, cost entity. It's now very collaborative. It's in the front line, and people do improve as we did when you work together. Very simply.
Yeah. And it's a two-way street because a lot of times on the product side, I would go in and a lot of the R&D folks would ask me, hey, when you're in there, take a look at what else they do, because it might be applicable to what we want to do or a new project that we have. Because if their process is under control, we have a good shot at bringing in, or developing a new product. And a lot of the Hot Pockets, the flavors were developed because of that. Other things that some of the suppliers were doing. So that was one aspect to it. And then the other side is when they have their when I see a process or a procedure that is above standard and is really exceptional, I would pass that along and I would ask them, can I use it? It was never, anything proprietary. It was usually some type of how they were processing or things they did. I was in a factory 2 weeks ago, and when they were, and this is more of an occupational safety, but I thought it was a great idea, is that when they're walking, there was so much forklift traffic and pallet jack traffic going around in there. And when you walk through, you would point to which direction you're going. So when we were walking through the facility and they had the blue lights on the forklifts or they were coming out, you would let that driver know, I'm going to make a right turn here. So you always pointed to where you were going to go. And it sounds like a simple thing. And some people might, well, that's kind of an annoyance. No, it's part of that safety mindset. And the occupational safety mindset translates right into the food safety mindset as well. We're preventing. We don't want people to get injured, and we don't, and that's the baseline. We don't want them to get injured while they're preparing the food, and we don't want anybody to get injured through our ingredient or our finished product.
Yeah. So it sounds like collaboration is important because you're like for Nestle, your guys' food is only as safe as your suppliers. That's how I've heard it said. But what would you guys say is when supplier relationships do go wrong, what are the most common reasons?
I think the lack of attention, lack of focus. You build a food safety program today, and it takes focus and effort. And like we talked before, a lot of perseverance to make that food safety program go. I think that same effort is required into third-party relationships. And when it fails, it puts the product at risk. I mean, it puts quality, spoilage, all those things, foodborne illnesses, it puts it all at risk.
Yeah, and to build on what Larry just said, because running any process, especially in the food industry, is very difficult. It takes a lot of dedication and determination. And so if we did have an issue with the supplier, my first question was, what happened? What changed? Something changed. There was a paradigm shift within your factory, whether it was on a corporate level or on that site itself, or if it's a privately held, one site operation. Something changed. And a lot of times somebody had left. And that's kind of feeds into the culture, because in my interpretation of a good manager is when the manager's not there, the process still runs. And so if you had a manager in there that everything was on that person, you could see it. They owned everything. They were there. If they were there 13, 14 hours a day and they were constantly checking everything, you're not doing anybody any favors, because people get sick or they have to leave or something happens. And if the whole process falls down because that one person there left, that you have a problem. And then the problem exists. And that's 9 times out of 10, that's what happens. Somebody was so involved and so into the minutia of how that, and the whole factory relied on that person to get things done. And then something happened to that person, things fall down. You cannot have that. You have to, kind of a strong manager is when you are gone, that process still runs. You've taught your folks well, and you've parsed out all those key components that those people will continue to do what they were doing and what they were trained to do. And as long as you're there, and then you build redundancy into the system, which is based upon cross training.
Yeah, as we talked about culture the last time, Patty, it's doing the right thing when nobody's looking. And in the food safety world, that is huge. In the manufacturing processing world, that is huge. And I think again, I'm going to elevate your supply chain management system to be on that same level. And I think that's why it does sometimes break down, because people just lack the effort to do it when nobody's looking. I think one of the issues we talked about yesterday, or one of the examples we talked about yesterday, was Boar's Head, where they had the many plant issues that are coming out now in the press, and just a complete breakdown in the whole thing. And it really comes down to, as I reported to very early in my career, I reported to somebody in England, and his famous saying was, it comes down to three things: management, and leadership. And when it fails, it goes bad.
Sorry.
That's okay.
And so how do you guys prevent that then? Like on the, Larry, maybe you can jump in on the supplier side, John on the customer side. If most of the time when things go wrong, it's because something changed or somebody didn't hold the plan, how do you be proactive on that?
I think it's the culture you build in your organization. And John paid me one of those compliments once about building that culture in the organization, where we recognized that we were a supplier to another company. And, in terms of the supply chain, the food industry, food safety mattered. And when we got feedback, we took that feedback seriously, and we implemented the steps that were recommended. We did our best to do that. I think that's critical to having a strong supplier relationship.
Absolutely. And what's really kind of beneficial now in the industry is that a lot of things have been layered out. So with the emergence of the third party auditing, right? So basically you have somebody in there, they're not there to consult. They're there to say, you said you're going to comply with this standard, and they're there to see that you are. And so that's a very needed aspect component of that. You have to have that baseline. Are they doing what they said they're going to do, and that they say they're doing currently? That's a key component, and I think that's a great baseline to start that relationship. But I think, and a lot of it's based on cost too. So can a company afford to have another layer that's there that goes in and works with the smaller issues? Because the smaller issues turn into big issues. Hair was the number one complaint that we had at Nestle from our customers, hair in the product. And it's that ick factor, right? So it's not so much a food safety issue as it is kind of a quality side where, so if you're able to, as a company's able to afford to have somebody who goes out and specifically works with those high risk suppliers and works on the detail side of it, the things that kind of the minutia that's really affecting, but it magnifies, because a little bit of, like we were talking about yesterday, a little bit of their product goes into a lot of yours, right? So on our side, right, when I was with Nestle, and I would tell them that a little bit of your product goes into a lot of ours, and so liability goes up, and if you have small issues, they're going to blow up on us, because it's going to be bigger. You think it's a small issue, it's big for us. And so that was the key thing. So working with the suppliers on certain issues that can have a huge impact on your sales or a huge impact on your production side, if there's a whole plethora of things that can, of little issues that go on, but they take time to fix, undo, things like that. If we can streamline that through the supply side, that's how I started with Chef America. Was I went out and they had a foreign material issue that needed to be dealt with one of the suppliers, and we went in, we really dug into what was actually causing that. We did the root cause analysis, created corrective actions, verified validated the corrective actions, and then had a procedure in there to verify that the corrective actions were still continuing within the process. Those are things that a third party audit, they're of high value, but they're not there to do that. Yeah. So if a leader out there finds that, our suppliers are all GFSI certified, great, they're all compliant, that's a good thing, and we know the baselines are being looked at and they're being evaluated on an annual basis, usually a 2-day audit. You get a lot done in a 2-day audit. And then, but it's these other issues that are out there now. It's that, let's get better. It's that reverse pyramid. We started here. Now let's expand that out and let's get better and then have a better presentation to our customers. We know that we're doing a lot of things not to hurt anybody, but now let's make their experience better. And you can monetize that.
I think when you look at, how these sometimes fail, you can start by looking at just a baseline of what's important with a supplier relationship. Choose a reputable supplier. Some of you've heard of before, somebody that's got some volume in the business. Communicate your expectations clearly. That's something that Nestle did very, very well. Monitor and verify. Check and verify, as John called it. Nothing replaces boots on the ground these days. I think when your food safety program is one big risk assessment, that applies obviously to your suppliers as well. What is the risk evaluation for that supplier to your company? So you monitor and verify. Boots on the ground, incredibly important. Train and educate. We went to several Nestle food safety seminars to learn more about food safety. We had Nestle in our plant. They saw how we ran those cups. We saw in their plant how they ran those cups. Training, education, incredibly important. And then, of course, I'm going to overuse the word now, but collaborate and improve. That's that open-mindedness. When one of those components fail, that's where the relationship goes awry.
Mm. Yeah, and even though you have a personal relationship with somebody, and I mean business personal, you break bread, you go out, you get to know each other, you have conversation about families and things like that. But the bottom line is that we're professionals and we have expectations. And when working with Larry when he was there at Eckert, and before that too, when they were before Larry, and when I was there after Larry left, that was still continuing on. And a lot of the suppliers that I worked with had that same, they were able to maintain that same focus. And that's a key thing. And it takes we hit this a lot, but the culture, but somebody has to be in there. Somebody has to still have that fire. Somebody, and the more people you can have still maintaining and dealing with their life. But when they know they walk in that door and they put that uniform on and they do the PPE, we're on, and we have to be on. And when the better they get at it, the more practice at it, it becomes more streamlined. And then the suppliers, Larry referenced this, was the supplier quality colleges. And so we held numerous ones of those. And that was a beneficial thing too, because not only were we able to sit in a room and talk about, expectations that Nestle had, then we were able to also get feedback on challenges that our suppliers were having to meet those expectations. And then we could work, to Larry's term, collaboratively through that. How can we help you on our side? We did things where we would help companies, secure different type of sorters, electronic sorters, or source, different types of X-ray and metal detection and things like that, screening devices that we had seen out in practice in the field, and we could recommend, a handful of those to somebody. And so that's how that works. Well, we're having a challenge on this. Well, we have experience on this side, or we would have challenges. Hey, when we receive your product, we're finding that we're having difficulty with these three things. Okay, well, here's what we can do to help you, but also here's some things as a supplier. This is what we found out that helps us. See what I mean? And that's how it works. And that's how it has to work. Otherwise, you're not.
It sounds like the common thread that I'm hearing is you have to have boots on the ground to even have the relationship, and you can't collaborate unless you have the relationship. Because I think we see a lot of companies, or hear from a lot of companies, where it's like, oh, our suppliers are unresponsive, or they won't send us these certifications, and then it's like, well, like, you haven't been to their plant in a decade. So it sounds like resources allowing, John, you're saying, and Larry too, just like boots on the ground, go build the relationship so that you can collaborate together and everyone's better off for it.
Mhm.
And a cross-functional team works too. Or if you have an individual that can go out there and talk operations and speak with the finance people and the cost accounts and talk to the management, and then go out on the floor and talk to the folks. You know what I mean? Or you bring in a cross collaborative group, cross discipline group that can come in, and then you spread out. One person talks to maintenance, one person talks to operations, the other one person's talking to quality. However that works, but you have to have that. To your point, Patty, in my experience, that's how things flowed, and that's how things worked, is because they understood us and we understood them.
Yeah. And some of these companies like we work with, they've been relationships for like decades or even over 100 years, working with the same farm or the same plant. And I think that's always cool to see, because there is that trust that's built over decades and decades.
But people change, right?
Yeah.
In and out. Families, you can have the lineage in that family, but things change, and so it has to be revisited. And I think it's a good idea, especially with a newer supplier, even a large company that's supplying a company, is that you have to go out there and do an annual review. Where are you guys at? What's your challenges? Here's our challenges. How can we work together?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of hinted at it a bit with talking about maybe what breaks down. But for you guys, it's Food Safety University, day one. What would you guys say are like best practices for supplier relationships? If you just had to give a crash course, you guys have mentioned collaboration. You've mentioned boots on the ground. Larry, you talked about some of that list you went through. Is there anything else that you guys think are like, hey, these are essential for the best relationships you guys have seen?
I think I kind of went through a list before where we talked about communicate expectations, monitor, verify, train and educate, collaborate and improve. I've always appreciated direct honesty. Bottom line it. Let's get to the heart of the matter. Let's fix the problem. The story I always use is during one of our conferences. We were in a big room with Nestle bigwigs. We had our entire senior staff there. Our QA quality people were there. And John gave an excellent presentation on foreign material. And he simply went up to a flip chart and he said, our expectations is this. He drew a 0 and he sat down.
A little more involved in that, but that's okay. We got
a little bit. That was my takeaway, John. It was pretty clear what that expectation was, and I think when you have that open-mindedness, that collaboration, that the effort that goes in that from both sides, you can be that direct. You can be that clear, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
John's like, I did a little more than just write 0 on the board.
Well, I was told to. But I'm glad that was my opener, and so that one obviously stuck with Larry, and that's what it's all about. Now it's easy to go up and put a 0 on a flip chart and then sit down, right? But then, all right, so now there has to be more involved in that, and we had done a lot. We had covered a lot of the foreign material prevention program because that was a big challenge, for us, and neither on our side and were we growing it or were we buying it was kind of our term for that.
Well, the exciting part is everybody deals with foreign material. Everybody deals with that problem. From our perspective, we were a pepper company. We were medium-sized. And to have somebody like Nestle with their wealth and depth of experience share their problems was huge for us.
And I know I'm being a little redundant, but the thing is it starts with that initial conversation. The biggest thing that I thought was when somebody did have an issue, and then it was always interesting. I learned so much how they dealt with it, because you're gonna face issues every single day when you're walking. When you're dealing with any manufacturing, any type of manufacturing, there's always something that's going on. And so how well do you handle that? And that, all right, let's get all the information. Let's sit down. Let's gather. Let's go see what happened. Get out there and really walk through the steps of how to really understand what's going on. And sometimes it's pretty quick based upon, knowledge. And so, or you really have to dive into it. And is the company that you're purchasing from willing to do that? And you know, the kind of one of the jokes in the industry is like, when the auditor shows up, then that's when stuff goes wrong. And my answer to that is fantastic. Not, you know, obviously, you know, it's not a great thing, but for me, I can see how you handle things, because I'm not there every time something happens, but I'm getting a pretty good snapshot of when something went wrong. This is how you handle it. And that shows me a lot, because now, again, back to trust. I trust that you're going to continue on to do that. You know, let's put it on hold, lock it down. Let's hold that product. Let's go back. We're not going to release anything. And if it did get out, we're sending out a message right now. We had a problem with this. Let's get it back. Let's get that product on hold. Let's figure out what's happened, and let's move quickly and effectively. And that I learned a lot. I was in there, and we always, another one is, you know, not only when the auditor's there, but never say that, you know, if somebody points something out. You know, I was one time, there was this big piece of peel and paint off in the corner, and there was a fan there, and all the product was covered, and it was, you know, and I was like, you know, might want to get that peel and paint taken care of. You know, I'm going to write it down, and so if that'll help, you know, get that done. And the person said, and this was quite a few years ago, the person said, oh, it's been there a while. Nothing's going to happen. Guess what happened? Bing, it went right into the fan, confetti all over the place. And I just looked at the guy, and he goes, I did that. I know. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I go, no, you saying that wasn't that. The good part was I was here. Now let's see how you handle that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
we spent a lot of time on talking about food safety and supplier relationships when it comes to food. We can't forget that there's bags, cartons, pallets, all kinds of other things. Outside storage. Outside storage was a big deal for Eckert. We weren't large enough to hold all that we manufactured, and we depended on probably over 60% of our product that we made went to outside storage. You know, you run once a year a seasonal business. So again, boots on the ground out at these facilities. You got to look at them. There's food safety standards for outside storage or carton, bag manufacturers, all kinds of things like that. And that can't be overlooked in your program. It can impact your food.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Then corrugators, and then carton printers. And because the corrugate and the cartons were not food contact. And because we had, you know, so our film and trays and things like that were actual food contact. But, you know, they can cause an issue. We had metal in corrugate in the flutes, and we're kicking off our metal detectors, things like that. So to Larry's point, it can cause disruption, and anything that can cause a disruption needs to be addressed and prevent, and procedures put in place to prevent.
Yeah. I was going to ask, just talking about that, when things do go wrong, what, like, you know, like I always say, like for a junior quality person, if you're telling them these are the challenges you're going to face, or these are the things that put stressors on doing the right thing for supplier relationships, what do you see those as? Like, why aren't people, you know, being honest? Why aren't people keeping to their food safety programs, that sort of thing? What do you see go wrong?
Larry, you might mind if I jump on this one real quick?
Oh, go ahead.
So when there's a failure, right? So there's a failure. So to identify the failure immediately takes a lot of procedures in place and discipline, right? You have to have certain stops within the process, certain checks, verifications that you can identify. The whole goal is to identify it as early in the process as you can, because you're putting time and money into that. So it becomes, you know, exponentially more expensive if you find it at the end of the shift. But so for kind of a new person into the quality assurance is, you know, are my preventive measures, right? Whether it's a CCP or a PC, is my controls in place? Are we able to catch that? And then do I have the people on the line that understand what this means, this preventive control, and that, you know, we validate it every year to make sure that, yep, that does what it's supposed to do. And then we have a verification system in place that we're monitoring that, you know, whatever those constraints were that we put in play, that in that procedure that's being followed. So we're okay. So early is better, early in the process, and that's to the whole supplier side. It's not only within our plant, but it's who we're buying from, right? That's the whole point of that. And so then once it goes through, but that put it on hold, right? Put it on hold. That's your backstop. A lot of times, if you have a second shift, and we laid out, my wife actually came up with this. Jeannie came out with a flow chart because she was QA manager and for multiple locations, and so she had a flow chart that basically told, is this a regulatory issue? Is this a quality issue? Or is this is the top boxes? Or is this a food safety issue? And then the flow chart went down from there. So, and then they had kind of a cause and effect report that, so, all right, here's what happened. And so this is how everything's on hold. So everybody could sleep at night, the day shift, you know what I mean? The managers during the day could sleep at night because you knew if something happened, it was going to be on hold. Then when you come in the morning, you have a report that says, this is what happened. This is how it happened. This is how much it happened to. This is what our initial investigation showed. And this is the product on hold in the hold area with the placards on it, dated and signed. They're over there. And we froze it in the system. Covered. Now we have the time to go back and we can go through the root cause analysis side of our program and pick that out. So.
Yeah, I think just to add to that a little bit, to answer your question, Patty, I think human nature takes over sometimes. Pride, embarrassment, neglect certainly happens. And when those things, interfere into the process is when you have breakdowns in the system.
Yeah. Absolutely. Is there pressure from other parts of the facility? I mean, we're not naming names or anything, but we talk to companies, they're very small. And if you're holding product or if you're not running a line because of something, like it could cost you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, which is a huge hit for some of these companies. Do you see that as a pressure as far as, hey, maybe your supplier quality manager their VP of ops is breathing down their neck? Is that a realistic challenge that people will face?
I think it could be a realistic challenge. I think food safety business has evolved to the point where if product is on hold for food safety, knowing the potential problems that could create with a recall or, certainly making people sick. I think, people are much more knowledgeable, educated about that now. And I think that pressure has alleviated maybe in the early days of food safety when it was considered a cost center, things like that. But I think in the day and age we are right now, the rational man understands why it's there. And good managers, to John's point, good managers know it's there for a reason, and they got to find that root cause of that problem to fix it. That's the only way you're going to move forward at that point. Product on hold is product on hold, and product that's going to be destroyed should be destroyed immediately. It shouldn't linger. I think that's where we are in the food safety world right now, and I don't see that changing. I don't think that pressure of the old days of production managers and things like that. I don't think now. Maybe in smaller companies, it might exist, but today with the big suppliers, big producers, I don't think that exists today.
Yeah, I agree. And especially with the advent of social media, now the exposure is so quick. And, in prior to social media, if there was an issue, somebody had an issue with something they purchased, a frozen meal or whatever, then they told somebody, well, maybe 10 people would hear about it. Now it's, a potential of millions of people hearing about it, because as long as people are reposting and doing things, we hear about viral. So I think there's just so much exposure now that it's not really an issue. And I agree with Larry, maybe in a smaller level, much smaller level, they could get away with some things, but it catches up to you, and that company will not continue on. There's going to be dramatic changes to that, financial hits that they can't overcome. And so I think that's a huge deterrent if somebody did have that. And I was very fortunate in my career. I dealt with a lot of different people in a lot of different countries that wanted to do the right thing. You know what I mean? There was some few instances of somebody, some food defense issues where somebody was, trying to contaminate food that actually worked there. We had some issues with that, but those were few and far between. Most everybody that I ever talked with or worked with wanted to do the right thing. If there was an issue, it was because there was some paradigm shift. Somebody left, something happened, there was a financial thing, something like that, where that issue happened. But with today's exposure, it's not. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, that's good. It sounds like a healthy evolution, and it sounds like it's good that, like you said, Larry, like food safety is no longer thought of as just a pain or a cost center. Wow, we are rocking and rolling. We got a little bit of time left, and there's one question I do want to get to, but as we're kind of wrapping up, would love to hear from you guys. How have supplier relationships changed over time? And then feel free to throw out your hot takes here. How should they change in the future? How should they be improving 10 years from now?
I think, and I think we've touched upon it, so I'm going to be a little repetitive. I think what's changed is supplier relationships are much, much closer and collaborative than they have been 20 years ago. It's just the speed with which this has moved has been great. And so I think that's what's changed. The fact that we enter each other's facilities, we spend time in each other's facilities to go through issues, to go through learnings, to go through educations, to go through expectations, all the things that make a relationship really strong have evolved today to simply for the reason that we need each other. We need each other. And it's all to make food safe in the supply chain, in the system, and to the consumers. Where it's going in the future, I think maybe to your point, Patty, smaller companies need to get on board if they have some of these issues that we talked about that they may have, may not. I think everybody has to get to this level of the relationship. John and I talked about the other day where it used to be that companies would never show their environmental swabbing results to customers. John probably knows more than I do. He's still active out there. I think that's where it is today, that you will share this information, not to beat you down, certainly to exclude you if things are not going in the right direction and don't get fixed, but certainly to get better, simply to learn and get better. So I think, that's where we're going in the future. I think these relationships will continue to strengthen. I think more and more information, daily information, operational information will get shared because it's that important to the brand. It's that important to companies being sustainable in the future.
So Larry's calling for a more transparent supply chain, it sounds like.
Well, I think Larry said it's happening.
Yeah,
that's true. It is. And you break it down, your supply, your ingredients coming in, packaging, those things like that. You're breaking it down to what risk level are we at with that item. So, if I'm getting corrugate in or, getting certain things that are pretty low risk, micro, and physical or chemical, then I don't need to see them, and maybe I can get their third party audit every 3 years. That's the way. But if there's something that's very crucial to your facility and to your product, your finished product, then that's where the decision has to be made. Do we want to have more increase that relationship with them and have a little more oversight? There's the third party auditing is now expanding, right? So before it was like one of the big three, right? FSQA, BRC, FSSC 22000. But now we're seeing that there's a lot of private entities out there that have their own audit. Costco now has their own audit. Amazon has their own audit. Trader Joe's has their own audit. on top of that third party audit. And so, just so building that layer of familiarity, and it's if you feel comfortable, if you have a business owner or a corporate manager or president, and you feel comfortable, or your quality people are telling you, I feel comfortable with just receiving this report, the third party audit, great. That's fine, because you'll prove it out. You don't want to prove it out with having an issue. But if there's something that an ingredient that you really need to have, I highly recommend that at least on an annual basis, you have somebody visit those suppliers. And for all the reasons that we spoke of, I think it's a crucial part of it. It's my experience. It worked very well for us. We were able to make huge changes, not only at Chef America, but at Nestle, by creating a better relationship with our suppliers, and multifaceted. And it's whatever your company can afford and whatever makes sense cost-wise. It's an investment. And once you have that annual review, and you sit down and you break bread and you talk and you go out and walk the floor, have them show you what's going on. And we talked about this the other day. Companies that are really attuned and really tuned up and really know what they're doing, and their procedures and processes are alive on the floor, they want to show you what's going on. They want to show you, especially on environmental monitoring. If somebody's actually trying to find it, they get excited about it. Man, we had this hit, and then we did this vectoring, and we went around, and boom, and we found it, and bang, boom, and they're excited. They want to show you what they did. That's who I want to do business with. Somebody that's passionate about what they do. And it's not easy walking into the same factory every day doing the same thing. That's not an easy job. And anything I could do to support those folks, I did, because I knew what that was like, going in day to day and doing the grind.
Yeah. We got one question here from Roselle in Indiana, and she was asking, how do you manage suppliers when the food safety programs maybe are not well defined and executed?
So the first thing, so on a supplier sense, right? So I walk in there, and then I say, hey, show me your food safety policy in your program, and we see that it's not defined. First thing I want to find out is, are you audited by somebody else? Because those are very basic things. That's a starting point for any type of audit. Show me your food safety policy, and then what are they identifying what their risks are? And so I would find out, hey, are you audited by anybody, a third party audit? And if they're not, okay, now so this might be a specialized ingredient. This company's coming up. It's kind of a mom and pop shop, so to speak, but they're at a certain level where they have the investment to do that. And that's a big one. If they have the investment to go in and start to fortify those policies, your decision at that point, if they're not able to define what their risks are, and then truly define what the actual risks are, and then they haven't created a HACCP plan or Part C or something to address that, then I would stop at that point, because they're not where they need to be. And that's a risk decision on their part. On your part, as that, the purchaser of that product, you have to make that risk assessment yourself. Should we move forward? Well, we haven't had any issues with it. Well, that doesn't mean you're not, because there's a huge gap in this. So start with the basics and then move your way up. And then that will build that level of comfort, so to speak, and trust that they know what they're looking for. They've identified what truly the risks are. They know, and they have solid programs to address those risks. They've validated that whatever they're doing to prevent those risks, they've validated that, and they're verifying it on a consistent basis. That's the bottom line. Everything else you might be able to work with, but that's the one, because that's the one that's going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, I would, from a top level point of view, someone who doesn't have well-defined policies, doesn't have well-defined food safety program, doesn't have a annual audit by an outside agency, I would be asking somebody like John, why are you even going?
Well, yeah, and that's a good question, and we've all kind of been involved in that. It's like, all right, well, I'm only going to go if somebody tells me to go, for a new supplier.
Right.
R&D really wants to check the supplier out. All right. And the company wants to pay for it. Great. Let's go. And I'll take R&D with me, and I'll take purchasing with me, and we'll go take a look. And then after that, we'll all sit down, we'll have a chat about it, waiting to get, to hit to the next place. So I think that's the way to do it. Get other people involved, and everybody has this is really a great ingredient in this company. This will really set us apart. Super. And purchasing, wow, the price is really good. And we really want, okay, great. But here's the problem. Here's an issue. And I've had these conversations before. We say, hey, wait a minute, but here's the issue. And then what that does too, though, is when you have this kind of interdisciplinary group that goes out there and looks at things, now R&D sees how the quality side is looking, right? And then purchasing sees how the quality, and I see what purchasing, and I would see how R&D is looking at things. So when I went out there, I wouldn't do anything on the purchasing side as far as negotiation. I would never touch that. But as far as R&D, like my earlier point, if I saw something that looked like, hey, this might be a potential for us, then I would pass that information along. But I think the interdisciplinary approach is also a good one for new suppliers.
Great. One more question popped up from David. He said, what is the rise in, quote, private audits beyond GFSI related standard audits due to? Is it lack of trust in SQF or BRC, or is it a need for more specific audit aspects, or both?
What was the question again, Patty?
What is the rise in private audits beyond GFSI related standard audits due to? Is it a lack of trust in SQF, BRC, or need for more specific audit aspects, or both?
From what I've seen is that there's a lot of redundancy in there. And so, but there are specific to what that private entity is looking for that may not be covered in the big three. And so that's where it is. And then it's also, redundancy doesn't hurt. It's a pain in the butt for suppliers, because we just had, a GFSI audit last week. So my thing is hey, all right, well, then you're fine. This will go quick because you already have that. So it doesn't hurt to have continuous reviews. And so that's not a bad thing. It's cost. There's a cost associated with it, obviously. But the thing is that if I want to do business with a big company like that has I'm required to do a third-party audit under the GFSI umbrella, and then also I have another customer, what's that piece of business worth to you? So that's another one. So I'm going to do that. Now, to answer the question is, there are some specifics that I've seen on that my personal experience. There are specific to what that actual product. So instead of taking kind of the big view of it, a lot of those are specific to what that manufacturer is providing for that entity. It becomes more specific, and I understand the value in that.
I think that's a good point. I might also add to that when you look at some of the major failures that happen today in food safety, whether it's Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli, many of those companies did have annual audits already. And I think, Nestle made a decision that while it's important to have those annual audits, they were going to put boots on the ground anyway and do their own work. And I think that's probably why you're seeing some of the rise that's going on in some of these private audits.
Humans are functioning and performing the certification body audits, right? So they're performing those. Humans are humans, and so I'm a big fan of redundancy. And so to Larry's point, yes, some of those were actually they were audited, and you can say, well, the audit's only as good as the auditor. There's a piece of that, but the criteria to become an auditor in a certification body is very rigorous. And there's a lot of training involved, and there's annual training that has to take place. There's an organization called Exemplar Global, and they certify all auditors. So you have to go through another whole process, and then you have to be certified within the actual scheme itself. So SQF BRC FSQA 22000 has its own set of criteria to be an auditor, where you can go work for a certification body that actually conducts the audit. So because of those things that had happened in the past, that maybe somebody was not really qualified to be an auditor, or created a relationship with that company
owner, which we saw a few years ago, where they were looking past things, then yeah, that's why that, maybe there are some issues that a private company says, I need a little more, a little more detail. I want them to be a little more focused on what they're doing for us. So those, and I've done a couple of those, is where it's baseline stuff on the big programs that are going to be covered under the GFSI umbrella. But then there are those specificities that are for those products that are being made for that particular customer.
I think the other thing to add to that is I think companies, and you mentioned this earlier, John, companies are becoming better because of the additional audits, because of the open collaboration that's going on. And it's maybe not viewed as a cost effort anymore. It's an opportunity effort to improve your own operations, to improve your own food safety procedures. And I think companies might be looking at it that way now and increasing their own hands-on boots in the plant.
And that's the whole thing, because, and I think that came up in your SQF discussion that you had a couple of weeks ago, and that was that where somebody brought up internal auditing. That's a key component. How are you looking at yourself? And you have to have that. And that's the whole baseline of that thing. And so again, audit ready every day. Doesn't matter who comes in. We're fine. Well, hey, points things out to us, not major failures, obviously, criticals, or majors. But, if there's minors certain here and there, okay, fine, we'll fix that. That makes us better because the little things add up. And so, again, redundancy in auditing is not a problem. It's not a problem. It makes you better, to Larry's point. And I fully agree with that. And I see it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's getting more specialized too, with like allergen specific audits, or, like palm oil certifications, all that specifications. But food will be safer off for it.
It doesn't matter who comes into your facility. You're going to be fine. FDA, USDA, whoever. Doesn't matter. County, city, state, doesn't matter. Come on in.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you both so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for jumping in and asking great questions. And tune in for the next one. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, guys.